What circumstance would you say that someone could respect the Constitution and separation of powers and blatantly violate what the Supreme Court said? Outline the scenario that could mean that you could respect the Constitution.
Like, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Look.
Let's try this. Where we're at here right now is it's okay for presidents to break the law and violate the constitutions in some cases and still say they respect the law, but just not Trump. So let's do this. Since we've got to this, hashtag it's different. Can you name me a president other than Trump that you don't believe respected the Constitution?
I mean, I'm having a trouble with it. I think most presidents generally act in good faith, and I think most presidents, I might disagree with them on policy or their implementation or their execution of the law, but I think generally they have a general respect for the Constitution. I think the United States has been fairly successful at choosing presidents to respect the rule of law and respect the Constitution and respect that. Yeah. I think Trump is an anomaly for sure.
Okay, so Trump's the only one you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And largely because he violates the separation of powers.
Yeah.
Okay, in 1808, Thomas Jefferson, the Supreme Court ruled that Jefferson exceeded his authority in enforcing the Embargo Act. Jefferson solicited and distributed a dissenting opinion from his own attorney general to continue enforcement, defying the ruling. Does he not respect the Constitution?
I'd have to look more into that case.
Okay, but if that's true,
if you're going back 225 years, I think that's a big issue for you.
Well, I think that your argument was violation of the separation of powers proves that you don't respect the Constitution. If one of the framers of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, blatantly ignored a Supreme Court ruling,
Jefferson wasn't one of the framers of the Constitution.
He was one of the people ideologically behind the principles that went into the Constitution. Because he wasn't one of the ones that wrote it. Who are the framers? Name the framers.
First off, I would say Madison, Hamilton, Morris. I'll throw Jerry in there. Franklin, Washington, Dickinson. Do you want me to keep going?
No, fine. So it's just basically, could we say the people that attended the Constitutional Convention?
Yeah, I think a fair thing to say. And I would say
that's fair.
Say probably. I would say Jay. I would say primarily.
If that's how you want to define it, no problem. But I would say that if you want to say that he wasn't a framer because he wasn't at the delegation, I think clearly the spirit of his writings and what he believed was heavily influencing the framers and what was created. If he,
he was definitely a big influence on Madison.
That's all I mean by it, right? Like, so if he intentionally violated the Supreme Court order, you're going to look into the case, fine. But let's assume it's true. The Supreme Court said you have to do X, and he said, no, I'm going to keep doing it, right? Would that mean that he didn't respect the Constitution?
I would have to look at it in totality.
Okay,
right? It's not if you do one thing you don't respect the Constitution. You'd have to establish like a pattern of Jefferson doing this.
What circumstance would you say that someone could respect the Constitution and separation of powers and blatantly violate what the Supreme Court said? Outline the scenario that could mean that you could respect the Constitution.
Like, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Look, this is irrelevant because it's irrelevant because like what I'm saying is it's not like, oh, well, if you do one bad thing, you don't respect the Constitution.
Let's go. Yeah, right? But these are huge things.
There might be competing factors. Maybe Jefferson's argument was, look, I'm looking out for the general welfare of the people. So right, which is what I'm tasked. That's part of what I'm tasked to do.
So you're like, even if we didn't have the alternate,
and if that's the only thing, then I would say it's fine.
If we didn't have the alternate electors, would the tariffs thing with Trump be evidence that he doesn't respect the Constitution?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a pretty big thing.
Okay, so tariffs a big thing, but the embargo that the Supreme Court told Jefferson he couldn't put on, not a big thing. Which actually restricted trade with the British. Details.
you're bringing up an example from like 200 years ago.
Andrew Jackson. He ignored the Supreme Court's ruling on
Andrew Jackson's there's probably a good case that he didn't really respect
Trail
the
of Tears.
Constitution.
Okay, Andrew Jackson didn't respect the Constitution. That's the argument now?
I said there might be a good case for Jackson.
Okay,
That's one I was
Abraham Lincoln.
But I didn't want to go back that far.
Defied Chief Justice Roger Taney's ruling in Ex parte Merriman, which held that only Congress could suspend habeas corpus.
Suspend habeas corpus,
yes.
Yeah.
Did Lincoln not respect the Constitution?
No, I think Lincoln respected the Constitution. But
you don't think habeas corpus is a big portion?
You're picking out a single thing.
No.
We were in the middle of a fucking civil war when he did that.
Nonetheless,
I would say that's pretty exigent circumstances.
No, wait.
And it wasn't just a civil war in his own head where he was like, I think there's a civil war. It's the greatest war ever. There's the greatest civil war. Everyone knows there's a civil war. He wasn't like that. It wasn't just in his head.
You see what the filibuster nonsense is, right? Like everybody knows what's going on. So you said tariffs alone are such an important issue that if Trump instituted tariffs, that alone would be proof that he doesn't respect the Constitution. That's what you said.
I said it was a big thing. I said it would be a really big thing.
You said that. I said, would that alone be proof? You said yes, because it's a big thing.
I think I said that would be a really big indicator.
Yeah, okay. No, you didn't say it'd be a good indicator. I asked you, would that enough be alone? And you said yes.
Okay, because my position, I've said this Rob, I've said this repeatedly. I've repeatedly said this. I'm not looking at a single point here and there. I'm looking at a pattern. I'm looking at like a big broad strokes here. Okay. So let's look at the tariffs.
I'm gonna keep going with my point here, right? So now what you're saying is that issue on tariffs alone would have been enough, but the suspension of habeas corpus isn't. Now, I would bet that most
habeas corpus in the middle of a civil war.
I would guess that most people, constitutional scholars, etc., would say habeas corpus and keeping it sacred is more important than tariffs and authority on tariffs. I bet most constitutional, yet he suspended habeas. And your argument is, but he had a good reason because we were in an emergency. Okay, Trump also felt he was in an emergency.
What was the emergency?
Well, Trump thinks, but with tariffs?
What's the emergency?
The middle class has been hollowed out in this country and that we're being taken advantage of and we don't have access to basic things that we need because of the trade deficit in our trade situation? By the way, what would you do if the Supreme Court rules that he has broad tariff authority? Then what would you say?
Well, I guess I'll have to say that the Supreme Court said that. I don't think that
would they be wrong?
I mean, the Supreme Court's been wrong in the past, but I'd have to say, yeah. I mean, if the Supreme Court provides a decent justification for it, then yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you think that Trump's lawyers have an argument in the tariff case?
No.
You don't. So then there's zero chance that the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. None of the justices. There's not even an argument.
I would say, if I had to guess, it's probably going to be like 7-2.
Okay. So those two Supreme Court justices, why would they vote in favor of tariff policy?
Because they're fine with giving more power to the executive.
Okay, but that would mean they view that it's constitutionally acceptable, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think they're liars? Do you think they're bad faith?
Bad faith, maybe.
It depends
on what their argument is.
Which justices are bad faith?
I don't know. I'd have to see their arguments.
Okay, you're predicting a 7-2, but you're saying there is zero argument whatsoever. That's your argument, correct?
I don't think there's any good argument.
That would mean
there's
definitely
obviously an argument. I mean, they went there and they argued to the Supreme Court. If we take
what you just said, you said your prediction is it'll be a 7-2, and also there is zero good argument that would justify it. That would mean, based on what you've just told us, that you would have to say that you believe those two justices are intentionally violating the Constitution.
No, I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's logically possible.
Well, then why do you think?
Their job is to interpret the Constitution.
Okay, so but if there's
and it's not a single justice. It's how the court.
No. If your argument is there is literally no argument, none whatsoever.
I said there's no good argument.
Okay, well, then how could any?
They can make a bad argument, sure.
How could any Supreme Court justice? How could you predict that they would vote for it then?
Because there could be ulterior motives. Maybe they want to give Trump more executive authority.
So your prediction is two of the justices aren't interested in doing their job of interpreting the Constitution. They are intentionally going to violate that because they just feel like giving Trump more power. Can you name those two justices that you're predicting will do that?
I can't. Maybe. Was it? God. Now I'm on the spot. Let's see. Hang on. There's Barrett. I'd have to look up the justices to see, and I can't remember off the top of my head which two it would be.
Well,
But
I think that you know
but-
what I think? I think you don't respect the Constitution that you would say that. The fact that
Why?
because you think that our Supreme Court is so shitty that there's justices on it that purely for political reasons will act. That doesn't sound like someone who respects separation of powers.
You don't think justices act politically?
It's not what I think, it's what you think.
Just because there's two people on the Supreme Court that would, I think, make a bad decision, I don't think that that's like.
No, I
maybe
think
maybe they don't.
I think it's different.
But Rob,
most of the time that the Supreme Court's made decisions I disagree with, I at least say I can see why it's a legal question, right? Most of the time. You're saying there isn't even an argument. There isn't even an argument. It's just absolutely 100% clear cut. President can't do tariffs. That's your argument.
No.
No.
That's not my argument.
Okay, what's your argument? You said there is no argument.
No, because I said there's no good argument for Trump's tariffs.
Okay. So then that would
let me give you an example. Okay. Do you think it's a national emergency that we have a trade deficit with Peru? Do you think that's a national emergency?
It could be argued within the confines of what the broad authority of the laws give the president that it meets that definition. My personal
Rob, wait. I have one follow-up question to that. One follow-up question. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I said we have a trade surplus with Peru and that's also a national emergency, what would you think of my rationale?
Argument would be the same for me. There's possible arguments that could lead to that. My relevancy and my opinion is irrelevant, right? For example, I'll give you an example. I think that the AUMF,
would it be the same? Would it be the same argument? Would it be the same argument for both?
Yes, I just said that.
Okay.
So I think the AUMF was bullshit, right? The authorization of military force, right?
Okay.
And if you read it, that came under Obama, it basically says anytime you could make a tenuous connection that this is fighting the war on terrorism, you're allowed to do a lot of shit. So, for example, you could target things, even with lethal force bombings, etc. if you could argue that there's some sort of, like, even financial connection between these people and terrorists. Now, do you think that's a good law?
The AUMF?
Yeah.
I think that should be repealed.
Yeah, I think we're together on that, right? That's fucking shit. But
I think it made sense like 20 years ago.
But here's my point.
Given that
And how broad, the reason we want that repealed, both of us is like, it's way too fucking broad, right? Way too broad. Who gets to determine whether or not there's a connection to some, I have to read the exact language, but basically like any tenuous connection whatsoever to any terror group. That fucking sucks, right? Because theoretically, that basically could justify attacking any country without congressional approval. Because all you have to do is say, well, we think that there was some sort of drug trade that went and benefited Al-Qaeda. Now we're justified in bombing Peru. And under the AUMF, the president would be allowed to do that as long as he could draw the justification, correct? So that's why we would say that's bad. Similarly here, same sort of argument. We might not agree or disagree, but the reason, just so you know, Bass Guitar, I enjoy talking to you. A little smarter than maybe the average person who would be talking about this, because the reason you're so hesitant to say the truthful argument, which is, of course, even though I disagree, there are legal arguments that Trump's team's going to make that are like, okay, that's worth considering. I just think they're wrong. The problem is if you concede that, then you have to argue, well, this doesn't mean that Trump disrespects the Constitution because he thinks that he's allowed to do this. If Trump would blatantly violate, let me finish.
In public, what did he say?
If the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do this, and then Trump goes forward, then you have a better argument. But that's not what's happened. The court has not weighed in on this.
But the Constitution has. Trump said his rationale for it, 90 deals in 90 days, which, by the way, we still don't have any trade deals. But it doesn't matter because who's tasked, according to the Constitution, who's tasked with doing trade deals? Rob, according to the Constitution.
It doesn't matter because the laws specifically give exception for Trump to make emergency sort of Yes, what I'm saying is, yes, you're right. Under the Constitution, like the power of the purse and commerce, etc., trade deals are supposed to be with them. Is there ever a time when trade deals are allowed to be made by the executive?
When Congress authorizes them, yeah.
Okay, only then.
Yeah.
So any time in history that any tariff's been applied at all that Congress didn't authorize, it's always a non-respect for the Constitution.
No, because tariffs aren't a trade deal.
Then
But
what's the
implementing
argument?
tariffs to get a trade deal, that is regulating trade with a foreign nation. If I say, look, I think it's important that I think for our national security we have to do have like steel or something, right? In the United States, I think that could be a rationale, but that's not an economic rationale.
That's not true. Of course, trade deals an economic rationale. Trade itself
no.
implies
I'm saying implementing a tariff for a national security purpose is inherently not an economic thing. It's a completely separate consideration.
Well, that's not true.
Other than you figure that you're going to be hurting yourself economically.
Correct.
But you're hurting yourself economically for a specific goal. Now, but that's a completely
Can economics
different
be
thing.
national security?
Not really. Not
I disagree.
As broadly as
I disagree. For example, like, could we claim a matter of national security to have strategy on the Panama Canal?
You could claim that. I don't know what claiming that would let you do.
Well, because what it is for the economic security of our country and things we need, it's a matter of national security that we have that economic throughway.
Yeah, but where's that going?
So in that sense,
I
an
can say
economic concern becomes a matter of national security. By the way,
that's not the Panama the Panama Canal for national security, but that's not an economic thing. That's not regulating trade.
So it doesn't matter. Your argument was that economics can't be matters of national security. Now you're forced to concede it and you say, yeah, but regulating trade's different. Maybe it is different on a superficial sense, but the core reason that you're saying regulating trade shouldn't be allowed by the executive is because it's not a matter of national security, because it's economic. But you just conceded that economics can't be
regulating trade. Regulating trade is authorized by Congress. A national emergency isn't. You can't say I need to have a national emergency to regulate trade.
Let me ask you, of course you can, potentially, if it's a matter of economics.